I think I was born full-time engaged in stories. All I wanted to do was read. But it took a long time to make the decision that I could become a writer. You had to be an extraordinary, special person to be a writer. So I thought that I needed a life that would bring me close to literature. I became a literature teacher. So I taught French literature for a very long time. I was in my 30s when at last I found the courage. It took decades before I really felt courageous enough. Well, it was extraordinary. I think I had read somewhere, and this is probably not very accurate, but it gives you an idea. I had read of 100 people who try to write a book, one will complete it. And of 100 people who complete it, one will find an agent. And of the 100 that find an agent, one will be published. So all the while I was writing my first book, I kept my expectations very low because I didn't want to be disappointed when it failed. Really, I was prepared for failure. Maybe 2 people would read this book. One is me, and the other is my mum. Every time I had to make a decision in writing the book, or should I write it this way, should I write it that way, I just thought, what would I like and what would my mum like? And really, that's all I expected. So if maybe 6 people had read my book, I would have felt overjoyed. When I finished my book and sent it to an agent, within days there was a UK auction with different publishers competing for the book. A few days later there was an international auction, and it was so far from what I had prepared myself for. I actually had a headache and felt quite nauseous. For me, it made me feel quite ill for a few days. And then I did do the adjusting, started to feel, actually, this is now the new normal way of living. It came, I think, from something I read long, long ago, something I experienced or heard about or read many years ago. And this was a story I found in a newspaper about a little boy in America who drowned in a winter lake. And he was pulled from the river, no pulse, his pupils were dilated, his skin was white, but an hour later he opened his eyes, he breathed, and he was alive. And this story seemed extraordinary. It seemed very important to me because my sister was ill at the time. I was very worried about her, the whole family was concerned about her, and I thought, this is great news because we can tell Mandy that if she does die, she must do the same as this American boy and she must find the way to come back. And my grandmother said, no, Diane, that's not how it works. This won't happen in that way. I locked it away very close in my heart and never forgot it. In fact, we were lucky in my family because my sister survived and she's happy and healthy and well. But years later, I found another story in a newspaper about a little girl in Spain who drowned in a lake in winter and then came back to life. But that story had explained the science. So I think it was those stories that were the long, long, long ago inspiration for the story that I wrote a few years later. I think that readers tend to have a favorite. They usually choose one of 2 characters, either Rita, the midwife, who is the scientist. She's the one who tries to understand the miracle of a child who returns to life. And many, many readers love her because they love her intelligence and her independence. But there's also a farmer, a mixed race farmer called Armstrong. He is the real emotional heart of the book. He's so kind and so loving. And although he had a very difficult childhood being mixed race, nevertheless, he has grown to be a deeply kind and empathetic person, and he always tries to help people who are vulnerable. And I enjoyed writing both of those characters. But when you're a writer, your favorite character is always the one that came most easily. And there's a little boy in the book called Ben. He's the son of a butcher. When he first appeared in my mind, he He appeared fully formed, and that's a real gift when you have a character who does all your work for you. So I think for me, my favourite character is Ben, even though he's a secondary character. Well, I don't know about condense, because condense sounds as though you're taking something big and making it small. I don't think this book is small. I think it's quite big. I was very willing to allow my characters and their lives as many words as they wanted. I think I began with a small story, and the story of the different characters grew bigger and bigger. With more and more characters, I allowed the stories to grow and to proliferate. Is a good place for stories because it's halfway between the public and the private. In the summer, the Swan Inn attracts people from the surrounding cities and the towns, and so the inn might be full of strangers and becomes a very public place. But in winter, there are no strangers. Everybody who is in the inn is local. The possibility of being both public space and private space, a place where people might come together who are very familiar with each other. It gives you that wonderful halfway space between the privacy of a private home and the open space of outdoors. That is very important for gossip, storytelling, communication. It's a wonderful place where information gets exchanged, human minds and human spirits coming together. So it was important in that respect. When I was a child, I was very fascinated by pubs and taverns and inns because children weren't allowed to go there. I think I had a very romantic notion of what these grown-up spaces must be like. Although I think my career might be different if I was a man, my suspicion is that commercially it may be that it works in my favour. Most readers of fiction are women, and women seem to like reading books written by women. When I'm reading, I don't really pay attention to whether the book was written by a man or a woman. I don't care whether the characters are. The way the imagination works is that you can project yourself into a person of any era, any nationality, any gender. I know that my second book, Bellman and Black, which is all about one man, should I have written a book all about a man and how his heart works and how his soul works? I'm glad I didn't have those doubts until after I'd written the book. It would have been a shame if it stopped me writing that book. It's interesting that you ask me that today, because today is quite an important day. Today is the very last day of promotion of Once Upon a River. So when I leave Guadalajara, I go home to England, and I can go back to my desk for the first time in nearly a year, and I've got some ideas, I've got lots of notes, and I can't wait to have the time and the space and the river walks so that I can really start developing those in more detail. I'm really looking forward to writing again, but actually the time feels right to go home and just be me and a story. It's certainly changed the way readers relate to authors. I used to feel that I had these very intensive periods of promotion, and then afterwards that would finish, and then I would go back to work. And during those years of writing the new book, didn't meet readers. It's very easy when you're writing a new book to get demoralized or to feel depressed because you might have several days in a row where things don't go well. But with social media, what I notice is that it forces me to remember that people are still reading. To be able to see that, it gives you so much encouragement. It makes you think, do you know, I will carry on writing this book because someone out there wants to read it. It gives you your heart back to continue when otherwise you might want to stop.